Hello, good afternoon to everyone. Please pay attention. You can actually choose language you would like to hear. We will start. Today we are going to talk about accessible inclusive tourism. My name is Katerina. I'm a project manager of a Purple Vest mission, and now I'll lecture for today Yuval Wagner, the founder of Access Israel NGO. And Yuval, microphone is yours. I'll be in a technical support. If you need any help, any questions, I can answer Russian, Ukrainian, and English. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to share with you this lecture or this presentation about accessible tourism. This is like I would call the basics of accessible tourism. And of course, if we will proceed on going into more details, then we'll continue. But anyway, about Access Israel, and Access Israel is unique by that it's an organization that promotes accessibility to all disabilities and in all areas of life. That means that one of the important areas of life, and I'm hopefully wishful that you will be able to enjoy tourism as soon as possible. But one of them, as you know, is tourism, culture, things that are fun. And by the way, every when I tell people in Israel and in the world that you are, while being under war, already promoting issues like this, they are super, super impressed that you prepare for the day after the war. Anyway, the issue of accessible tourism is regarding 1.3 billion people with disabilities. This is a huge number that I didn't invent it. The World Tourism Organization has made a research and found out that these are the numbers. Of course, this is such a big number that never ever a country will be able, or it will take many, many years to bring so many people to your country. But I'm always trying to analyze this number and remind you all, and I'll go to the next slide, that first we talked about the 1.3 billion people with disabilities. Another statistic number is 18% of the population are people with disabilities in most countries, between 15 to 18 to 20%. It depends how you measure it, but again, it's a big number. And when we're talking about people with disabilities, we always have to talk also about the elderly, that 50% out of the elderly are with disabilities also. 50%. When they get older, the ability to walk is getting worse, the hearing getting worse, the visual getting worse, the cognitive ability getting worse. But again, when we talk about the 1.3 billion and the 18%, we should remember a few things. One is that I divide this to three. 1/3 have disabilities, but they don't need anything regarding accessibility. They can manage themselves regularly, even though they have a disability proven by the doctor. Another 1/3 is people that they have disabilities, but its limitations are medium. They can walk, but they can't walk alone. They can go up 2, 3, 4 steps, but they can't go a lot of steps. They can see a little, okay? They can manage the daily life, but they are very appreciative of accessibility. But 1/3 of the population, of the potential population, really needs accessibility. It's crucial. With no disability, they don't come. Okay, and these are the people that are blind, deaf, with wheelchairs, people that the disability is more severe and they need. Now, I want you to know another fact that is very interesting, that mostly people with disabilities and people without disabilities, when they go outside to a vacation, usually they don't go alone. They go with a caregiver, or the wife, or the husband, or the family and friends. So when they decide to go to one country or another country, to one hotel or another hotel, to one attraction or one museum or other museum, that means that businesses or the countries that are accessible enjoy the statistics numbers twice 2, twice 3, twice 4, twice 5. So it's giant numbers. So in tourism and culture, the numbers duplicate themselves and make it even larger potential. Also, we know of very other people that enjoy disability and they don't have disability, like parents with kids that they have a stroller. They enjoy it too. Very tall people, very low people, very fat people. So they have people that can't read or hard for them to read. It's all people without disabilities, but they love disability. So when we talk accessibility, I know Michal talked to you last time about accessibility of services, but accessibility under the umbrella of what it means accessibility, we have the physical accessibility, the streets, the buildings, the interior design of buildings, parks, sport venues, everything that is physical. Services that Michal have told you. All the services that the organization gives the tourist or the client. Digital, especially websites, applications, autonomic machines or kiosks, and the employment of people with disabilities. So when we talk about accessibility, I always like to make sure that I'm talking the same language with other people, because sometimes they have different words. People sometimes instead of accessibility call it inclusion, and sometimes they include one thing or two things. So when I talk about accessibility of an organization, of a business, of a ministry, of a local city, of whatever, I'm talking about making for example, the hotel chain physically accessible, services accessible, digital, and employment. Now, one very interesting thing is, still when we're talking about target market, there are, and this is very important to know, and I'm pretty sure that you know this already, but I will emphasize it again, that different accessibility equals different disabilities. For example, if you sit on a wheelchair, you know you need parking places, you need ramps instead of steps, you need elevators, you need accessible toilets. But if you are blind, you can walk steps. You don't drive your car yourself. You need different things. So as someone with vision disabilities, you need to have no obstacles. You need all kind of warning signs so you don't tackle dangerous things like stairs. You need to be able to read signs or read information. If you're hearing disabilities, again, it's different. You can walk, but you can't hear. So things that are relevant for vision or relevant for physical disabilities are not relevant. So it's very important to remember each accessibility or each disability have its own accessibility that is implemented. We will later talk about where we can see how to do things. Now, regarding tourism, every disability again needs different things regarding tourism. For example, people with wheelchairs will need to know in advance where they can stroll, the routes, the trails, where they can stroll with a wheelchair. So place where they don't have ramps and place for all the wheelchair are not relevant. People with wheelchairs need accessible toilets. They need room hotels that are accessible for wheelchairs. A hearing person or a blind person doesn't need the room for a wheelchair. He needs other things. A guy on a wheelchair needs a public or accessible transportation to go with a wheelchair from one place to another. For example, vision disabilities, again, needs to know where are the places that are accessible for blind people or vision disabilities. And when we have guidance, you need different guidance that actually tell in words what we see, because he can't see what we all see. So we have to describe, the guides have to go training to know how to describe what we see so he can imagine. And hearing disabilities need different guidance, maybe with sign language, or maybe in written materials, or in other materials. So we have to make sure that both the places are accessible for different disabilities, but also the tourism is accessible differently for each disability. One thing about the Israeli law, which is pretty similar to other laws around the world, I don't know how it works in Ukraine, but in Israel, we have a people with disability equal right law, which is a general law for equality and opportunities. But then they have the regulations. And over here, the regulations are more specific for tourism. That means, for example, it says you have a section that is dealing with hotels or / accommodations. And it says, if you have 70 rooms, you need 1 room station. If you have 80 rooms, you have 2, for example. And lastly, the accessibility standards, this is a technical part that says, okay, now that you know that you have to make 2, 3, 4 rooms that are accessible, this is a specification, the standard in detail how high the bed, what the distance between the bed to the wall, where the shelters were high, and many, many, many more details in information. What is interesting that in the last year, I think it was last year, if not 2 years ago, the European Union have launched the ISO accessibility of tourism standards. And this is amazing because this is something that will be in all of Europe. That means everywhere you go in Europe, you will find the same accessibility, which is great. So if you're thinking of what legislation or standards to implement, I would recommend to take the tourism accessibility standards and implement them as is, not to invent anything new. The more you have the same, then everything is much, much cheaper to implement, to buy, to learn. The more consulted, everything is much, much, much easier. One more thing that I want to share with you about the accessibility laws that have made in Israel a giant effect. What happens in Europe and in the United States and in Canada and in many countries, they have laws, they have regulation, but they don't have the teeth. It's not really true. The teeth is only by lawyers that may place a lawsuit against places that are not accessible. But in Israel, in the laws, every person, every one of you can see that something is not accessible, and they can go to court, complain, and first make sure that accessibility is done, second, even get money for that. So this has helped many, many organizations to promote accessibility in Israel. Also, the commissioner of people with disabilities in Israel also have teeth, and he can also engage every business and tell him, listen, I saw that you didn't do the job right. I give you 30 days to fix it. And if not, we'll go to court. So the teeth is very, very helpful to take things from not done to done. Another thing that can be done, like in Israel, in Ukraine, is make sure that the laws and standards are all over the country, not only in one city or another city. So today, when you come to Israel, all major cities are very much forward accessibility because they all have the same standard, they all have the same obligation. Yes, some cities have less money, they did less, but the business sector all over have done a lot, and this promoted a lot of accessibility. Another thing, this is super amazing that you should know, each business or each municipality or sometimes municipalities, each unit in the municipality have to appoint accessibility director that goes to training in Access Israel, and we teach him how to promote accessibility in the organization. Of course, he uses consultants, but he is the project manager, he is the ambassador, he makes it happen. So accessibility director is very, very powerful tool. And the last tool that is powerful is that, again, by law, organizations must every year train the service givers on how to help and assist and service people with disabilities. All of these unique tools have progressed Israel a lot as accessible country. Now we go back to tourism. Over here, I didn't tell you, but I myself sit on a wheelchair for many, many years. And in the past, I was a pilot. I had an accident and I broke my neck. And since then, I'm on a wheelchair. Now, when every one of you is going on a trip, you decide where you go. Okay, you search the web, you got a friendly recommendation from someone, you buy the tickets, you buy the hotels, and you plan your trip and you go. But when people with disabilities want to do it, for them it's much more frustrating and much harder. Because I, as a person, for example, I have to understand the accessibility of each part of the sequence. When I try to find information on accessibility on the airplanes, on the terminal, on the buses, or tour buses, or taxis, or trains, on the hotels, on the attractions, on the museums, on the restaurants, on the parks. This is a lot of work. Today, a lot of startups are trying to find solutions for that. But still today, it's very, very hard to collect this information and decide where I fly. When I fly to an airport, how do I get from the airport to the city, to the hotel, the transportation, which hotel I find that is accessible, what attractions I can go to, what museum, what restaurant, what parks. And if I want to go in the country to another city, again, the search and the search and the search. This is very hard and very frustrating. But if you make all of those places accessible, and this Michal showed you last time, making the physical accessibility, the personnel of the service givers, the websites, the kiosks, the call centers, and the reservation, the information, events, and technologies. If you make everything accessible, and when you finish making, okay, each one of them, let's say you are an hotel management, a manager, and you made your hotel accessible by doing all of this. At the end, it's very important that you also write on the website what we call your services of accessibility. So if a potential client wants to learn about your accessibility, he can open the accessibility page and you can read all the information of parking and everything you need to know in order to enjoy this place. Okay? So what kind of accessibility types, accessibility of tourism types? Of course, you have interior on one hand, people with disabilities and the elderly from inside Ukraine that want to do a tourism in another city or another part of the country. On the other hand, you have the incoming. You have business and you have leisure. You have personal and you have family. And you have group tours. This is all kind of the different accessibility tools or options that you have, and you have to be ready for them. What does it mean to be ready for them? I'll give you an example for something very important that happened. I will just go out 1 second from the Zoom. So you're all offline, so I'll stay in the Zoom. So I'll give you an example that happens, and it's a problem all over the world. In all over the world, all standards and regulations have decided that they would have 2, 3, 4, 5 rooms that are accessible for wheelchair. Now, this is great for business. Usually they come a few people, and personal and family. But if you want to arrange a group tour, 5 rooms are not enough. That means it's a big problem, because now you need to arrange a group tour of 20 people, okay, for example, 10, 12 rooms. You have to find 2, 3 hotels. Imagine how complicated it gets. Now you need a bus, not just a regular bus, an accessible bus for wheelchair, which is a problem too. Do we have enough buses like this? And this bus now has to start at 1 hotel in the morning, go to the 2nd hotel in the morning, 3rd hotel in the morning. So every stop takes much more time. So during the day, you can do much less. So this is a barrier that is happening all over the world, that you can actually take the standards of the tourism and change it a little and make sure you have more rooms from the beginning, so you will be able to bring not only business and leisure, personal and family, but you can bring the big money, which is group tours. Most of the countries in the world, most of the cities in the world cannot bring group tours. This is a big, big mistake and big, big opportunity. So I go here to the business model. We understand that they have a huge potential market. We said even we talk about 1/3, which is 400 million people around the world. To bring 400 million people to your country will take years. But on the other hand, it can be great for the business tourism sector. If you have a restaurant, if you have a hotel, if you have attractions, the more people coming, you get money for that. They come to your business, they pay money. So the business sector have a big interest that your country will bring as many people. But in order it to happen, you have to have accessibility in all of those places. In the airport and the terminal, transportation, hotels, attraction, museum, restaurant. If these places are not accessible, only little of them, that means you are stuck in tourism for little people. But if you want the big opportunity, the big money of bringing groups, you have to make a plan how you are open for the big numbers. all the countries like Israel are now struggling what they can do now after they already did the regulations. Now to change, the hotel are very angry. No, we don't want to pay money. You want us to do it? Give us money to do it. Invest in us. So if you're doing it from the beginning, remember to go for the big numbers. Now, on top of the enjoyment of the business sector, also the country enjoys of a lot of income. Okay, more taxes, more people go through the airport, and also the bigger the businesses growth in jobs. And what's interesting is not only growth of jobs, of regular jobs, it growth of jobs that are inclusive jobs, which means jobs for people with disability, because they become experts on doing the right thing for disability. So getting closer to the end and then open for questions. What is the way that I recommend, in a brief way, how to engage the huge potential of tourism? So first is to really believe, really understand that it's good for your country and you must have it. I call it the awareness for the importance or awareness for the potential. Now, if you can convince the government, the municipality in your case, that it's something that you must do because it will enable to be a giant driver to your city, then you have to make a decision and say, yes, we want to engage it. We want to make our city or our country tourism accessible. Then it's very important to establish a legal system, legislation, that include, as I told you before, the ISO, European ISO of accessible tourism. After that, you will have to learn, train, find a way to have consultants that will be able to help the implementation of upgrading the accessibility in all of those places. You will have to have enough consultants that will be able to engage all of those people that are managing those places and to have them accessible. Remember, we talked about the information. Super important, because when you are already ready and open to have incoming tourism, you want to have the information about where to go and what to do in an accessible way. Very easy to use. Remember, I told you how it's frustrating and how it's hard to use information? You have to make it very friendly, very easy. So it's easy to make a plan how to go to, it's easy to choose the accessible hotel. It's easy to understand how do I transport from the airport to my hotel, from my hotel to the restaurant, from my hotel to the museum. And lastly, it's not websites, it's supposed to be advertisement. Lastly, advertisement. That means to make sure that people with disabilities, and especially people that arrange groups, to be able to get this information of how accessible Ukraine is, and to actually give them all the tools and all the info to actually drive and arrange and implement and execute groups of people with disabilities to enjoy Ukraine. So by that, I'm finished. I finished my presentation. I will stop sharing. As I said, I'm Yuval Wagner, and you can contact us by Katarina. And if you have questions, I'm for you.
Yuval, can you just describe, let's say, your way to the restaurant? As we understand, this is not so spontaneous. So if you do want to go to the restaurant, do you have a checklist? What are you checking? What the question you're asking? Or it's usually just one or two special places that you already know that they are accessible?
Again, the idea is that you have legislation that describes in details, like the ISO, what does it mean, accessible restaurant? When you have a definition, it includes the definitions for people on wheelchair, the definition for people with hearing disabilities, and definition for people with vision disability. So accessible restaurant will be accessible for all disabilities. In Israel, the way businesses are being reviewed, every business, or most businesses, not everyone, are being managed by a unit in the municipality where it's called registration of businesses unit. Whereas the unit have to be registered correctly to its category of business. And when it wants to be approved, one of the things that you have to do is to make itself accessible. Now, mostly accessible business or accessible restaurant in Israel and Europe will be pretty much the same, which means no steps at all or a ramp, and the door width is big enough. It's easy to open the door. The paths inside between the tables are wide enough. They have an accessible toilet. They have special furniture that is very comfortable for wheelchair to go under, and for the elderly to sit on chairs with handrails, but also for vision disabilities. They will probably have signs. They will have alerts before steps, and they will probably have in the restaurant a braille or an audio menu. For hearing disabilities, it's known as a problem, because if the acoustics are very hard, a very noisy restaurant, they usually are very, very, very hard for them, and they don't have any unique request regarding that. But every place have different demands. So we talked about restaurants. If we talk about train station, it's something else. We talk about terminal, it's something else. We talk about museum, it's something else. But again, if you adopt the ISO standard of accessibility of tourism, it includes definitions for everything. The target is to make sure that all businesses are accessible in the same way. So it's easy for the users to know what to expect. And it's also easier for the businesses that they know exactly what they have to implement.
There is a few questions in the chat. The first one, if we have in Israel the restaurant that they are receiving people only with disabilities.
Now, in Israel and usually now in the world, they have like a trend that is called the inclusive trend, where we do things together. Many, many years ago in Israel, kids with disabilities went to special kindergarten and special schools only for people with disabilities. They didn't go out to regular places. Today in Israel and in many, many other countries, we have the equality laws where kids with disabilities go to the same schools, the same kindergartens, the same businesses, so they are together with the society. And the society is changing and enable people with disabilities to be a part. So no, we don't have special places for people with disabilities. It's everything. It must be inclusive.
And another question, if it exists in Israel some understanding like tourism for children with disabilities, if there really need accessibility for children, and if it's really different from the accessibility from adults, and how it works in Israel.
Great question. Well, we don't have right now different definitions of what to do specifically for kids regarding tourism. If we make a kindergarten accessible or a school for the first grade, we do things that, for example, the accessible toilets are lower. So we do a few things for the education, but in the tourism industry, we don't do anything special. But what's interesting, that I told you that everything had to be inclusive. So I think maybe 5 years ago, we have passed in Israel a law that also schools have to enable kids with disabilities and also parents with disabilities and also teachers with disabilities to be part of school. That means, for me as a parent, let's say my kids are perfectly healthy. This is my situation. If I need accessibility to come to their event or to visit the manager or to visit the teacher, school have to be accessible for me as a parent. If I'm a teacher with disability and I need 1, 2, 3 to be a teacher in a specific school, school have to be accessible for the teacher. And of course, if I'm a parent and I want my kid to study in the school and he needs 1, 2, 3, school have to make sure he have 1, 2, 3. Regarding tourism, because during the year, the kids go to culture, to field trips, and other tours. When they plan an accessible for a class that 1 or 2 or 3 of the kids are with disabilities, they have to make sure that this event or this trip or this operation or whatever you would call it have to be fully accessible and equal so everyone can do it together in an accessible way. So what happens from that we see that more and more tourism locations, that they want to have more and more invitations from schools that they have kids with disabilities in the classes. We have what's happening is that they upgrade their accessibility more or different than what happened in the regulations or the ISO. They do what they need to do in order to be able to get invitation and payment for specific tour for specific class. I hope I answered the question.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen?
You are always invited to send us questions through Katerina, even if it's later.
I would like to ask an additional question. I do know the area, and the area was a very, let's say, agricultural area. So we do have in Israel the self-services that we are going out to for cherry or other fruits, okay? Do you have this experience that they are accessible for you? Like going out and to be outside and just be in agricultural area and enjoy the agriculture area?
Yes, it's not that shouldn't have to be any problem to go almost anywhere. Okay, you can always find a place, and if they're good people, they will make things happen. It's so everything is possible.
Questions, suggestions? Someone? No.
Okay.
Yuval, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon again. Be safe, and I wish the war will stop as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.